35.
34.
33.
32.
31.
30.
29.
28.
27.
26.
25.
24.
23.
22.
21.
20.
19.
18.
17. 16.
15.
14.
13.
12.
11.
10.
9. 8.
7.
6.
5.
4.
3.
2.
1.
It's time for mouthwash. Giddy up.
Hi, and welcome to yet another episode of the Mouthwash Talk Show, a minty fresh take on politics. Episode 56. We just keep on rolling like a rolling stone. And speaking of stone, hey, we have an interesting show tonight. Sort of came together last minute. Lucy's freezer went out and at like 7 tonight. And so she calls and says, hey, I can't, I got to go get my freezer stuff. You got 10 kids and your freezer stuff's getting thawed out. That's not good. You don't want it. So Jason Straw with Normal, if you don't know what Normal is the pro-marijuana legalization group. And he was on Mark Small show tonight. So I sort of stole him from Mark. He was real happy about that too. But this is going to be a great conversation. And I know some of you that aren't watching, and you know what I'm talking about, are probably watching that State of the Union, the deal that they got going on tonight. And I'll tell you, our show is going to be much more entertaining. So tonight we have Martin Mitchell on, and he is actually from the Maryland area, just south of Baltimore in Laurel. And he's got a little show called People Over Politics. And, we got a little page called People Over Politics. So I invited him to come on a couple weeks ago. And it just so happens to be that he's sort of a pro-marijuana candidate as well and what he does. So this has worked out well for him. But I'm interested to talk to him about East Coast, West Coast politics and all that good stuff. But we're going to give him a hard time about stealing the Colts back in the middle of the night. So hey, I'm going to start out a little bit differently tonight. We're going to do the Mark small talk, because Mark's talks about how he stole the Colts back in the day. And he's got he doesn't have a whole lot of kind words to say about professional sports and their what do they call that, welfare for rich people, he calls it. So I'm going to play this Mark small talk, and then hey, we're going to meet our guest Martin here on the other side. So enjoy.
I'm Mark Small. This is Small Talk. It's March 1st, 2022. Let's talk about the Colts having moved to Indianapolis in March of 1984 in the dead of night. Now, what did we benefit from having a professional sports franchise in the big league for sports at the time, football, the country's favorite? What did we gain as a community? Well, community pride. Did we gain any money? No. No study has established that subsidizing professional sports is cost beneficial to a community that expends that money. Also, if like we host a Super Bowl like we did in 2012 or whatever, the NFL looks at that money. They know how much money is going to be made. They want more of it. There's going to be a profit to the city. They want all of it. The worst deadbeats in the world are professional sports franchise owners. They've got an oligopoly. They don't have to compete with anybody. They've got the whole enchilada. Now, we got civic pride for that, for a lot of money. We could have bought everybody a big screen TV in the city of Indianapolis and said, we're going to do a vote on who we adopt as our mascot team for the city. maybe the NFL would have sued us over that. Well, okay, we'll do it on the slide. What about the Pacers? The Pacers had to do a telethon to stay in Indianapolis. We don't even know what they make. They get all the revenue off of the field house, as the Colts do off of Lucas Oil Stadium, okay? So we don't even see their books. Here's a problem. Basketball's really, really popular in China. When supersonic aircraft come back and people are actually traveling between continents in like 4 or 5 hours, how long? How long will it be before China starts buying up NBA franchises, as they should, because they got the money? And then where will all our money have gone? When we are still paying for the Hoosier Dome, by the way, and I still call it that. So we shouldn't subsidize pro sports, and nobody, it's an elected public official that votes on any funding for those sports at all, should be allowed to accept freebies to those games. I'm Mark Small. Catch me on Civil Discourse now, 7 o'clock on Tuesdays before John's show, Mouthwash, and have a groovy evening. Peace, love, happiness, freedom, and all that.
Yeah, I don't have the nerve to tell him that they just passed a law not to allow the 1 cent beverage tax sunset to pay for the Lucas Oil today. So, Councilman Mitchell, how are you this evening?
Doing well. Delighted to join you guys today.
Yeah, you said you had some meetings today. So, it's always meetings, right?
Per usual, right? Per usual of being a public servant. So happy to go to meetings.
So you don't look old enough to remember when the Colts left, but I may be wrong on that.
Well, I definitely wasn't, but I do remember hearing about it.
Yeah, it's well, you got those Ravens, and how many Super Bowls have they won? They won at least one, right?
Yeah, I'm not a huge football fan, but the Ravens, yeah, I believe they've won at least one.
Yep. So hey, and the Colts have won one since they left, so it's really not that big a deal, and you don't have to worry about all the problems that come with the sports teams. But I wanted to have you come on because, one, you're a member of the People Over Politics, and you actually have a show that you're doing, People Over Politics, and you're covering issues. And one of your issues is legalization of marijuana, and we happen to have a good guest for you tonight to talk about that. But real quick, let's talk about maybe the difference in politics, or maybe the non-difference. We have an interesting dynamic here, and it's probably a lot like that all over the country, where our rural areas are just GOP red, and most of our cities are Democrat blue. Is that about how things are in your area?
No. So for one, I'm not familiar with. Do you have a Republican governor or Democrat? Do you have a Republican governor?
Yep, Republican governor and Democrat most of the mayors.
What about state legislature?
It's Republican. It's like super majority.
Ours is very much different. Maryland is a Democratic state. So the thought is we do have a Republican governor, but the reason being because voter turnout, is low, and the Republicans have been very together in the state of Maryland. So that's why, of course, you have Larry Hogan, and the success probably is some people don't see him as too dangerous for the most part, and they also like that he criticized Trump on certain things, because he's a very middle of the road, temperate Republican. We think in Maryland he's going to run for president or senate. But yeah, Maryland's a very different place than, of course, Indianapolis or Indiana, and of course, I think it's 3-1. 3-1 registered Democrats as Republicans. But if we lose again at the governorship, I would say we're a purple state.
There's a lot of color changes going on right now. So yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and bring on the panel now, because I know that they're gonna have some questions for you. And like I said, we got an interesting group here. So let me go ahead. I'm gonna bring on. We have two actual guest hosts tonight. We have Big George Sturgiopoulos in for Tiffany on the Republican side, and then we have Ed Liptrap, our normal guy, is a Democrat from South Bend, and then we have the chair of the Indiana Normal, and his name is Jason Straw. I'm going to bring him on first here and get everybody sort of moved around and get the thing set up here right. Now we're going to do this. Okay, let's do it that way. So, Jason, you're like a super last minute here. So go ahead and tell our audience a little bit about yourself and, hey, why the heck are you on this show?
So I'm a retired U.S. Air Force captain, deployed twice. I am a medical refugee from Indiana, moved to Michigan. And my wife and I love cannabis because of the benefits that we reap from it and the benefits we see our friends and family. So since about 2015, I've been advocating for cannabis because of the patients I saw benefited. I grew up in a police family for generations. I had a cousin who was a DARE officer, so we were all against cannabis until we started seeing the benefits, and it really surprised me what I didn't know.
Yeah, so this is going to be an interesting conversation because I want to see what Councilman Mitchell has to say about his aspect on that. So I'm going to go ahead and bring George on. Let's get George out here on the spotlight. Big George, how you doing? This is this is going to be a good show. Last week we had all the females on, and this week it just turns out it just happens to be all males. So that's cool. But go ahead and tell us about yourself and what you do in Indianapolis.
Well, just moved to Indianapolis from New York City in late 79, early 80, and family, struggled, just found our way into the restaurant business, opened up a restaurant in 1987, and now it's still going pretty strong. And then me and the significant other have two new establishments that we opened up during this last 3 years. So we're moving, man. We're looking for opportunities. And, I say this every time we get together on the show. This is the land of opportunity, and nobody can tell me any different. And I don't want to sound cliche and conservative because I'm kind of a pro. I'm okay with the legalization of marijuana. I don't have an issue with that. My biggest concern is that, if we do legalize it, that these big multinational corporations don't take over and control all the distribution. I think it should be, more small businesses like the ones we run that, should control small farmers. I think that's pretty important. I know that somebody had sent me, I was having a conversation with somebody a few years back, and they sent me a label from Eli Lilly, and I wish I would have kept it, of what they did with hemp back in the, 30s. I can't remember the exact time period that label was from. I do believe there are benefits. I know people that use it on a regular basis. I'm not one of those people. I can tell you if they do legalize it, I'd say this jokingly, but also serious. I'd probably get on my bicycle with a big one and drive right down South Meridian Street, having a good afternoon. I could probably tell you that. So,
yeah.
No, I just, I think it'll definitely be helpful. Again, it's just going to matter who controls it, who controls the making it, the distribution, and all that kind of stuff. I think, though, that when we do make that step, I think that we need to definitely strengthen the laws against people who are distributing other drugs. I know, being in downtown Indianapolis at 9 East Market Street, one of the things we've seen is these new drugs, these sprays that people are using that are just destroying them. I mean, literally people just convulsing in the middle of the alleys, things we had never seen in Indianapolis. And I know Martin's in a big city. I grew up in a big city. Unfortunately, our cities have kind of taken a turn for the worse. I know one of the big things is during the elections, the inner city Democrats were able to, carouse people, get them to the polls. They ordered pizzas from us to take pizzas and feed them, but they can't make any real changes in our neighborhoods. And I know we got 2 or 3 city councilmen that, always, as soon as you say something to them, it's an attack, and their responses are, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. And they have high crime rates in their areas. They're not addressing that. And we're stuck on some of these social issues, some of these antiquated issues. And I think that's where we're doing the biggest damage.
All right, George, I'm going to have to stop you there because you're having a show on your own right there.
Well,
but one of the things about controlling the substances, it's harder to grow an aspirin than it is to grow a pot plant. So that's one of the things, people will be making their own beer, making their own, weed and whatnot. So, but I'm going to go ahead and bring on Ed here and I know you're going to have some good questions. So save some questions for the rest of the show and let's bring Ed on here. All right, Ed, how are you this evening?
I am doing awesome. I am normal. I am, yeah. I'm
That's
a normal
questionable.
guy.
That's questionable.
So far from not true. Not. This is a truthful show. Okay, this is not pie in the sky stuff. So is it snow melted up there yet?
It is, and I can tell you right now. The interesting thing about being on South Bend. I am probably, for a normal person, maybe not myself, within walking distance to Michigan. And we are in a completely different zone up here because unlike Indianapolis, people can go right across the border. It is accessible to us. And so this is an issue. I could tell you I am scheduled in April or in March, later this month, to go up to the expo that they're having and of like growers and distributors in Michigan. And then I'm also set to go out in April out to Las Vegas to their big show out there. And so this is like I said, I introduced myself to Jason and I'm excited about this show because I am all in favor of legalizing marijuana, especially as a veteran who has seen the benefits that it has had for some of our troops. I can't believe, and also as someone who supports cancer patients, some of the stuff it's ridiculous. I don't understand why we haven't legalized it yet.
It's sort of like follow the money. Well, we're going to bring our guest back out here, and here we go. So, it's we'll give Councilman Mitchell what's your take on the legal weed and whatnot?
Hey, well, as you know, if you don't know, I'm a cannabis advocate. So I'm wearing this pin. It's the Black Power Fist clutching the leaf. It's Last Prisoners Project print. And if anybody's heard of the Last Prisoners Project, Steve D'Angelo, he does a lot of work around bringing awareness around people who are still serving prison or jail time, on cannabis-related offenses. The thought is yes, of course, I believe that we should legalize. I also believe that it should have never been, prohibited in the first place. The thought of, controlling nature. The thought of controlling nature is crazy to me. And then, also, as George mentioned, there can be a lot of research done on, not just, of course, the cannabis plant, but the hemp plant. Hemp has hundreds of uses. So as we continue to, develop and as we continue to legalize, we will find this out. But America is behind on hemp. For one thing, I'll say there's other countries that are exploring the different uses of hemp. Hemp could be used in clothing. Hemp could be used for tools. Hemp could be used in food. There's a million things in which hemp could be used for. So of course, for me, I want legalization to happen, but I also want to make sure that as we legalize as a state, Maryland, because for the medical program, we had issues with diversity, inclusion, opportunity, I would say. So of course, in the legal market, we want to make sure that those opportunities are there, and those opportunities are there for the people most impacted by the failed war on drugs. So we want to make sure that those people have entry into the market, right? So not just from the dispensary standpoint, all the way up to the growers, all the way down to the ancillary businesses, the delivery services and, so on and so forth. So the thought is of course, legalization should happen and it should be equitable to the people, of course, that were most impacted by that. And I believe in automatic expungements. I believe in vacation, of stays. I mean, vacation of charges. So basically, there's people who are getting high now, right? So these charges that people were facing cannabis related should thou never exist, and be adjudicated through the legal process. So those are, of course, some things that, I believe in. And I believe that the money that, usually goes towards funds should go directly towards the communities that is closest to, like at the county level or at the municipal level. I don't, want the state legislature to have to come back every year and decide where the money goes. And, is this going to benefit, Black people or people in color? And I don't just say Black people, because it's also people who are poor, right? Because the criminal justice system, we know, is discriminatory for people, who have not. So.
Yeah, if you don't have money, you go to jail in this country. If you got money, you can get out of it. I mean,
it's all about poverty. Until we wake up and realize that, we're going to continue to have these problems in our societies, especially in our inner cities. One thing that I want to say, I agree 100% with Martin, is that the war on drugs definitely failed, but I think the biggest failure is local and small communities that have not empowered their police department, given them the right equipment, given them the right training to be able to go solve these issues, because we got to differentiate between legalization of marijuana and all these drugs that are on the streets and the gangs. I remember there was a friend of mine working on the gang task force here in Indianapolis, and he had made unbelievable progress. I mean, it was crazy. We had sat down for 2 hours, and he told me everything that he had done and the changes that had happened, and administration changes, and he's right off that task force and moved somewhere else. I mean, he was making so much progress. I mean, we need to take the politics out of our people. Our priority, and I know I take a lot of flack. My parents are both immigrants. I grew up in New York City. I speak my language fluently. I live my culture, but my priority is the people that live in this country, that live in my state and live in my city. I draw the line there. Everybody else is after that. I remember driving through Gary, Indiana 2-3 years ago. The highway was closed, so I got off the road. I get to one of the main corners up on Ridge Road. I'm in a neighborhood that's in the United States of America. That's all I saw at that red light. I saw a liquor store, a wig shop, fast food restaurants, and a hooker on the corner. Man, we have communities in our country. This is America, and I'm not, the one thing is, I'm not going to lay the blame on our governors, and although they get some of the blame, but I'm not going to put all that on our governor. I'm not going to put that on our presidents. I'm going to put that on our local communities and our local leaders. They're the ones that need to step up. They need to step up. I can't be telling you that we have these issues going on in your community and you want to talk to me about something different. And when I bring that up, you immediately say, well, this isn't the forum for it. It's absolutely the forum for it. It's always the forum for it. When you have a community, or you're a city council person, or you're a representative and your community's for shit, the forum is every minute of the day. Some of these people got to grow some backbone and step it up. They got to step it up. Just because you can talk good on the social media or you can put out a nice press release does not make you the right person. We need people that are going to go fight for our people, period.
And that seems like the kind of, that's what I've noticed from Martin. And if you want to catch
I have too.
Catch his shows, Martin, go ahead and tell us real quick where they can catch your shows.
Sure. People Over Politics, Facebook, YouTube. And Facebook and YouTube. Facebook, YouTube.
I don't know
BaltimoreNews.com or blacknews.usa.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask Jason to jump in here and ask a question, comment, or whatever he wants to put in there, because and then Ed, you're up next, so be ready.
So I agree with you, Mitchell, 100% on moving forward with legalization. I'm normal, so and I like that you focus on expungement and correcting the damage to our communities that our government has done for decades without rebuilding those communities like George was talking about. We're never going to get anywhere. So as a council member, one of the things in Indiana that I encourage the council members to do is to try to pass resolutions and send them to the state, or encourage the mayor to encourage the law enforcement, like the chief of police, to deprioritize cannabis as much as they possibly can. Have you as a council member, had an opportunity to do either of those things in Maryland?
No, those are you just gave me some great ideas.
Well, here in Indianapolis, it is basically decriminalized. Our prosecutor has come out and said, "Hey, we catch you with the joint or whatever, yeah, we're gonna look the other way."
John, our prosecutor and our mayor have decriminalized everything. Okay,
hey,
let's not even. You know that's for another show. I mean, those two clowns have decriminalized everything. Okay, where to come out and just use words to pacify people. Oh, we'll decriminalize these mayor. They have decriminalized everything in our community. Everything.
They've stolen all my stuff, and I got nothing to show for it. So, Ed, what kind of question might you have? This one really got Ed's attention on this subject. So
it is, and Martin kind of touched on it earlier, and I'll go back to what George said. One of the really hard things is financing. Like if you go to a lot of these inner cities, I know in South Bend, there are definitely areas that financing is really, really difficult to get. It's hard to open up a business unless you have cash to infuse into it. You have banks that have pulled out of certain areas, and without those banks are only required to lend within a certain radius of where they're at. And so where you have these dead spots, it's really hard to get the capital to open up businesses. And so, and I would ask Martin, like, have you thought at all of not just decriminalizing, but when we're talking about putting financing, keeping it local, of using that to leverage to help open up small businesses in areas where it's hard for people to get financing? Have you worked on that at all or looked at that?
Well, I would say that, of course, we're still in the early stages. In Maryland, this is all in the state legislature right now. So legalization is actually a conversation right now in the state legislature. From January to April, we have a 90-day General Assembly in Maryland. That's where they decide on a couple hundred bills that get passed, and then they become active either like August or like November of the following year. And so we have a referendum bill, HB1. So that's going to be sent to the voters. If it just passed the House, so if it passes the Senate, it's then going to go to the voters in November. And the thought is yes, there's an overwhelming majority of voters who will be supportive of that. So the question is what the framework of legalization looks like, of a legal adult use market looks like. There's several ways to accomplish that. The way that Maryland is attempting to accomplish it right now is by using a companion bill. So the companion bill is going to have the framework on how the legal market will look, because the thought is a lot of people have the belief that how are you going to send a referendum to the ballot that is very broad, right? That just says legalize for adult use, marijuana for adult use, 21 years or older, but says nothing else. So of course this other bill is going to then be decide the framework, and I will advocate, and I have advocated at the state level, going to the Senate and testifying on what I want to see in the bill, amendments I want to see in the bill, and I'm actually going to be at a hearing on Thursday. It's a Senate version of the companion bill, or the framework bill, I would say, and I think this bill goes further on equity because it actually includes home growth. Because home growth is important because when we had the conversation of home growth, for me, it's from a cottage business aspect. I believe cottage business license and micro license are important because it gives people who necessarily wouldn't have the capital or the income to gain access into the industry, access into the industry. So, basically being a small business owner, you could be a small business owner. You don't have to, be a big level dispensary, so yeah.
Yeah, this has been very interesting, this topic. And I know since we've had some guest changes, I wanted to talk about some other stuff. So I want to sort of shift gears to maybe some similarities between, I know you're south of Baltimore and Laurel, but Baltimore and Indianapolis, I don't know if you're definitely an older city, but, probably about the same size possibly, and maybe not an area, but some, I don't know where we are on the list, but we're like top 20 of cities, I think. I don't know how they count them, but So like, like for instance, like how's your murder rates going? How's your, homelessness? What are those stats like? And then I'll let George fill you in on ours.
As a state, I'm not 100% sure. Of course, I live in Laurel, so Laurel's about 20 minutes from Baltimore or 20 minutes from DC. As in Baltimore and DC, of course, they're still having an issue with violence and record high murder rates, which is nothing new to the area. Of course, I live in Prince George's County, and even Prince George's County has had an uptick of violence. So I think the county executive, she just had a press conference yesterday that said she was going to start an anti-violence task force, and but she also reminded people that we can't politic our way out of crime, and the reason I say that is because I think that like what she meant by that and what she meant to say is like there's not just one simple way to solve crime or to get rid of crime or to do away with crime, because like there's multiple reasons in which people commit crimes or why crimes happen. So I think that's what she was trying to say, and it's of course a very complicated answer, but she started a task force. But yeah.
Yeah. So George, give Councilman Mitchell an idea of what we have going on.
Well, I want to say that I kind of try to follow the statistics of a lot of the larger metropolitan areas, and it's kind of there's a sad situation and a big disparity in Baltimore, in the inner city of Baltimore. Crime's very, very high, violent crime, murder, and all that, according to the compared to the national standards. But don't worry about it, Martin. Indianapolis has surpassed our little city because we're a big city, but we're really a little city. I mean, we're under 1 million in the proper area. Percentage wise, we've surpassed Chicago, Illinois. I mean, we haven't reached that pinnacle of being Philadelphia, but we're working our way there. So I think one of the big things with crime is that we have to have the right leadership in the prosecutor's office, the right leadership in the mayor's office, the right leadership on the city county council that are going to attack this crime. I served 6 years on the police merit board, and I rode about 125 times over that 6 years. And I like to ride in the inner city. Not because of the action. I don't like action. It was really depressing, but I wanted to learn about the situations and the scenarios. We really, really have to empower our police department. We have to get them the right training, and we have to get them the right equipment. And we really need our sheriff's departments and our police departments that are responsible for warrants to go out and serve that top 25% of the most dangerous warrants to battle crime. It's like I said earlier, we have decriminalized everything in our community, and it's been such a drastic bad change for us. And I think a lot of the inner cities face this. They need people to stand up like you're doing, and say, hey, enough is enough, man. We got people living in homes that are afraid to come out their front doors, man. We got senior citizens that won't go outside in a lot of our inner cities across the country. And now I was watching the other day, Minneapolis is asking for billions of dollars to rebuild the city from where I want my tax money to go? I want my tax money to go to the two things that cities should do. And that's our infrastructure and protection of all of us equally. That's where the money should be going. And that's where we should be concentrating our energies. And I think everything else will kind of fall into place. But definitely Indy is a disappointment. And unfortunately, the social media and this, these smartphones that we have we don't have to face anybody. We don't have to face anybody anymore. We just throw out a tweet or we throw out a message, and then that's it. It's good enough. We got a lot of battles to fight in our inner cities for our people. They're our people. And people get upset at me when I tell them the truth, and immediately they start getting insulting and labeling. I just tell people the truth. But one thing that you said, and this is a great one thing you touched on, is about small businesses, and I'll end it on this. I've had 3 young people from the inner city that all happen to be Black approach me because I know everybody in the area. One guy was a young barber. He didn't have his licensing in order, right? But he was real gung-ho. So I said, you know what? Let's get your paperwork filled out. I took 15 minutes. 15 minutes. I called somebody at the Secretary of State's office that I was with, and I said, hey, we got a young guy here that wants to, legitimize his business. And we did. And he's doing it really, he's doing fantastic. I had two other young kids. One guy was a furniture finisher who I met who worked part-time at the local casino as a cashier or whatever. I told him, I said, whatever you do, he was telling me about his business. He said, look, I refinish furniture. And I said, dude, let's start from scratch. Have you incorporated? Have you got a bank account? Have you done all this? He didn't do any of this. It seemed like a mountain for him to climb, and he disappeared. And then there was another young kid that had some kind of moving business, and he disappeared because it was too much of a mountain. We got to get into our communities and teach people that here in the U.S., these are the differences that people are leaders could make, is go out there, the JA programs of before, I don't know what you would call them now, and show these kids how to start these small business, how to be legitimate, because you got to start out right. To have a good end, you got to start out right. All these education programs, we took freaking home ec, we took civics, and we took shop class out of school. And when we were talking about this a couple of years ago, my friends on the left said, well, that's slavery, having kids working at 16 years old. That's child labor violations. 5 of my wealthiest friends who barely made it through high school, barely, all are tradesmen. All are tradesmen. We can't find plumbers for our restaurants, our homes. We can't find heating and cooling repair people. We can't find electricians. We can, but we got to wait. We can't find construction people. These are things that we need as communities at that level where Martin is, where our city council is. And instead, we got city councilmen that want to talk about social issues and use their social media to talk about, their sexual orientation or their race or their ethnicity. It is meaningless. It is meaningless. We do not achieve anything. My friends on the left talk about no labels, but yet we want to put labels on everything. How about the label of American? How about the label of young? How about the label of drive our kids? I had a friend of mine who has 3 mixed kids, and she posted on Facebook one day, when you see a young black kid or a young mixed kid, give them the motivation. There is never one time that I didn't try to motivate, and I'm not perfect, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be perfection. I don't care what child it is. I don't care if it's black, mixed, Asian, Hispanic, white. If I see somebody that's troubled or having an issue, I always try to give them motivation. We shouldn't be divisive. A lot of my side is called divisive, but that's not the way it is in the real world. We need to grab these young people when they're young and lift them up. Lift them up. That's the problem we're having in our communities. And when I talk to people in our community here, John, and everybody else, they're always like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. I do not want to hear all the BS. I want results, and I want actions from you people that have taken responsibility and have taken the job to be public servants. Okay, it's not for you to go to football games and basketball games and, to be treated like royalty at restaurants. That's bullshit. That's pure bullshit.
Yeah, so I think Martin's probably not at that level of things. But one thing I do want to bring up with, and then I'm going to let.
No, I wasn't saying that. There is probably good ones out there. I mean, we have a couple of good ones here. There's good ones in Baltimore and Laurel. I'm not saying there isn't. But when you're talking about the majority, John, when we're talking about the majority,
by the people that are wanting to be served and not serving. But one of the things I want to shift gears to is like. So I noticed on your show, Martin, it's mostly mostly black folks that are on your show, and you're on the Black USA News Network. This is one of the things that I have conversation on times. And this is a little bit probably uncomfortable type of a thing. And I had one of my black friends say, "We want allies. We don't really want you with us. We want somebody allies. We want support. We just don't want you with us." And I'm like, what does that really mean? Are we all sort of in this together? But I get some of that where it's coming. So Martin, what do you say about that? I know now we're going to get a little deeper here.
No, I got you. And just because George said so many interesting things, I gotta I gotta respond to that. Then
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
respond to the ally comment. So the first thing, of course, he was talking about, motivating people, helping people with their business ideas. Of course, I agree with him 100%. I believe that we should have more trades back in our public schools. I believe that we should teach financial literacy. Of course, I believe we should teach like business management skills. Early the same way that we push any other program. I believe that we should put the fine arts back in schools, right? So we should be able to let kids have fun, express themselves. I believe that we should teach coding to kids as early as elementary school. Teach kids coding as early as possible, so they have these transferable skills later on in which they can monetize. I believe one of the things that he mentioned, of course, with the crime and everything else, I believe that we can't police our way to prosperity. So for me, I believe that a lot of the police departments that I see, and especially locally, they have enough resources. I think it's like 60% of our city budget, is spent on the police department. And the thought is that's only a city of 30,000, a little bit over 30,000, Laurel. And I believe that we should invest in programs like mobile health crisis units that respond to people as if they, having a health crisis or a mental health crisis as or a substance abuse issue as opposed to a criminal issue, because of course, in these in these instances, a lot of times, law enforcement officers, they're coming from a law enforcement officer's perspective. They're not coming from a, caring constituent perspective, right? So if you have this mobile crisis unit, you can have, therapists, you could have drug recognition specialists who, help people, cope with certain addictions, and they really help them out. They could handle simple, domestic issues, and the thought is if a armed officer is needed, the armed officer can be backup or secondary. But I believe that exploring these other options, in Baltimore, you have abject poverty in a lot of different places, right? You can go from one area where it's thriving and it's now gentrified, and then you could go around the corner and it's boarded up houses everywhere. So I think, of course, you can't. There's not just one way to solve poverty or to politic our way out of poverty. One of the things that I even suggest, and I've seen it before, is they have these squeegee boys. If you've ever been to Baltimore, there's a lot of teenagers who were running up to windows and they're squeegeeing people's car for money. And the thought is a lot of times some of them skip school to actually do this. So of course that's not great because they're missing out on education. But when you have a conversation with them and talk to them and you're objective, you understand that, like, hey, they have a different set of life circumstances, than I do. So of course, being understanding, one of the things that I would love to bring them on to the campaign. These squeegee boys would be some of the best campaigners you've ever seen, the hardest working canvassers, phone bankers, and the thought is like, I've done this with young people in my area. I've done this with some friends, and they didn't even know how much of a people person they were, until they started working on campaigns. And they also realized, just much like I realized, that you can change lives through policy. So it's also, as George said, I agree with him. There's, I believe that the Democrat, Republican, there's a false dichotomy. I believe that the two are very, very different, but very similar in a lot of different ways. So I believe in, as he said, results. I believe that you change policy through lives. And I believe that, of course, you have to present policy. You have to speak on policy. You have to, push for these certain programs and things to happen. You can't just be a socialite who just continues to get elected. And a lot of times in Maryland, and especially Prince George's County, we have something called slates. So if you're on a sample ballot slate, you're usually in good standing. But what we have now is we have progressives who have stood up and they're forming their own progressive slates. And you have a dying breed of like old moderate Democrats who had a stronghold. So that's what I think you have in Maryland. But the second question you asked me was about the allies. The thought is I've led several protests. I've planned, marches and stuff in my area, in my county. And, I appreciate, my white allies, because even in the 60s and before, you always had, white people and, other people who weren't of color that cared and were compassionate. And I think that what some people want to keep in mind is they want you to be allies, but they don't want you to co-opt the movement. So the thought is like they want you to play your role, play your position. And the thought is if there's a group of black people, of course, if there's a group of black people and let's say there's a meeting going on, of course you can provide insight on, how you think this group of black people should proceed on black issues, but you shouldn't be the final voice or the loudest voice in the room. So that's one of the things that we're saying, or that they probably mean by being an ally. But of course, we're all in this together. So if we're working together, we should continue to work together. And as you've seen, many different leaders that were effective, and I would argue like the Black Panthers, were very effective in, getting different groups of people, the Appalachians, the Chicanos, even, Martin Luther King and the Rainbow Coalition. The thought is you need to get these different groups of people to agree on issues. And, I don't believe that, I need to go down the line on Democrat, Republican. I believe that people should vote on issues.
Yeah, like they said, politic over people. So, Jason, you have a question or comment? We sort of, me and George sort of sucked all the questions out of the air there. And
there's a lot of things that came to my mind because I ran for sheriff in Indiana and Hamilton County, which is the county just north of Indianapolis. And I went around the state and talked to several sheriffs, and what they let me know was about 70 to 80% of the people who were in their jails were mental health and drug addiction prisoners. So they said, we need a solution for the mental health and drug addiction besides jailing them, because we're spending, $20,000 to $60,000 a year per person to keep them in jail, depending on where they are in the country. So that's the first thing is when we start decriminalizing, like marijuana, you remove some of those people. They're not going to be going to those services anymore. And some people are comfortable with what they know. So if they've been in jail a lot, that's kind of a comfort zone for them. So it doesn't scare them. Other people like myself, you throw me in jail, I'll freak out because I'm not used to that structure. I was in the military and we had a lot of structure, but jail or incarceration is different. So that's one of the things is finding another solution besides jail for mental health and people who have drug addiction, which I think Indiana's starting to move forward on that. The other thing is law enforcement need a little bit of medical training. When I started talking to the law enforcement officers, I said, do you guys have a glucometer to test for diabetes? Because when somebody is too low on blood sugar or too high, they can show signs of being intoxicated or drunk. And they'll just arrest them and put them in the jail, and they might sit there the whole weekend. And some people have died in these jail cells. They used to call them drunk tanks. But if you have a person and they can just pull out a glucometer, test them, they can see, oh, this person's having a medical crisis. It's not drug related. And I believe law enforcement should be service people, protect and serve. And that makes sense to me. A pulse ox is another wonderful device for law enforcement because if somebody is a COPDer and their oxygen is 87%, 89%, they're going to be confused and aggressive. So if the law enforcement officer approaches these people with the thought of, let me give them the benefit of the doubt. I know it's hard. My family's been law enforcement for over 100 years. And you have people who are trying to be aggressive and hostile towards law enforcement. But these are ways to build bridges. When someone has a law enforcement officer come up and they say, do you have any medical conditions? Is there something I need to be concerned about before we go into what you did wrong legally, as I see it as a law enforcement officer? that builds respect from the community that, oh, he's worried about my health and wellness over just punishing me for a law that might be arbitrary in that person's mind. So, and I've seen plenty of great videos where the cops help little old ladies across the street or stop and play basketball with a group of kids. And I think that should be encouraged. With that way, the law enforcement, the people start to get to know them. I had a great grandfather who walked a beat and everyone knew who he was. And the little old Italian lady would come out and say, you need to go over to that house. You need to go over to that house. And she wouldn't really say it. And he'd walk back behind and someone's trying to break in. Because he had that relationship of taking the time to get to know the people. He cared about them. And he didn't just enforce the law. Little old lady had groceries there to bring in. He'd grab it and he'd walk with them to the door and help them get their groceries in the house. So those are lessons that we have lost through time, through experienced beat cops. And we are driving our law enforcement to be more hostile, especially when we had the war on drugs. We were attacking people and everybody suffered, especially the minorities and the poor in the inner cities. And when George was talking about the inner cities, I was thinking, oh my gosh, we have a veteran. When you empower your veterans groups, like Indiana has stripped veterans of funding and they have fought them tooth and claw. And I actually had a state rep say, I don't care if you're raising funds for orphans, widows, Purple Heart veterans, Gold Star families. I'm not going to give you charitable gambling in the posts. I don't care. And when you have politicians that say, I don't care that you're helping people, I believe that person should be out of office. So we have veterans that are doing food banks. They got a grant. So if there's grants and stuff and you know areas, you can encourage veterans to reach for those grants to help areas. The government has barriers that they put up. Michigan, for example, with the medical marijuana grows. So my wife and her friend has gone around to a lot of these local seminars put on by the county and the city. They tell you, you have to have everything built and done before you can even apply for your license. So you got to spend $1 million to set it up. And then you might get a chance to get the one license for that town or that township. So creating barriers like that is very disheartening to people who are genuinely trying to work, like George saying, that barber and the other.
But Jason, but let me tell you one thing, and Martin too, please. I have to interject here on one thing. I love the crisis idea, Martin, but let's be real here, my man. That stuff don't work. We tried the safety ambassadors thing, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't happen. We tried the safety ambassadors in downtown Indianapolis during COVID and the year post-COVID, and it got nothing. We got a few guys walking around. They're great guys. They're good if somebody needs directions and stuff like that. But when the doo-doo hits the fan, the cops got to start running. And on the financing, let me just touch while I got them in my memory because I'm old and I forget a lot of stuff. Police departments in Laurel or Fishers, Indiana, might be well financed and get a majority of the budget. But in inner cities in the United States, I've created two of the biggest fundraisers in Indianapolis that started in one of my restaurants and one that started as a let's get together and take a little bike ride. And now they're two of the biggest events to raise money for these particular departments. And what has happened is Jason brought up the beat cops. I grew up with beat cops too. Why don't we have beat cops? Why don't we have a full bike patrol working all the time? Why don't we have the motorcycle guys who are great conversation for everybody, and usually guys that are strong personalities that park their bikes and talk to young people about the bikes? Why are those getting unfinanced? And as far as that Italian lady goes, Jason, I grew up in New York City. That's right. That Italian lady's going to say, hey, go in that house right there or walk in that building over there. There's something bad going on. A Greek lady would have said the same thing because there were no repercussions. We have old people in the inner cities that close their doors and put down their curtains. I went on a run one time with an officer. There was an 84-year-old woman sitting on her couch knitting, and the bullet had gone over her head and into the wall. Okay, people, we're talking about different times and we're talking about different places. Police departments in the big cities, the right departments are not funded. We have a sheriff's department in Marion County that basically has no responsibility since the merger. They get $125 million budget per year, and warrants are unserved by the thousands. You cannot have crime rates go down. And you know there's facts out there of communities that have had attacked warrants, especially high felon warrants, and watched their crime go down in their communities. Why is this not a national plan? I've been on 125 ride-alongs, and let me tell you, we try to make it look like you're walking into something. You walk into a house at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's 40 people inside the living room, and people are walking around, coming out of rooms, going upstairs and going downstairs, and you send 2 cops in there to do that job. What kind of good can come out of a scenario like that? And honestly, from the statistics that I know from Indianapolis, we're not arresting people that are having diabetic comas. We're not arresting people that have COPD. I'm sorry, that is absolutely not true statistically. The problem that we're having in our communities is where we should be concentrating on our energies, like my favorite, the beat, the bike patrol, the motorcycle guys. Why am I raising money for them? Why don't they have their vests? Why don't they have their bicycle parts? I see the bike guys riding, talking to everybody, interacting with the community, erasing fear from that. And really, do we really need to keep beating that dead horse when we know statistically that police in the United States are the least bad in any profession? We have, and I don't know why we don't talk about this. We have terrible lawyers. We have terrible doctors. We have dentists that are raping and drugging people. I mean, we have teachers that are, come on, guys. We need to get real about this. We need to go after the people that are the bad criminals, okay? I'm with you 100% on the decriminalizing marijuana. I'm with you 100% on building that relationship with the community. But we need to go after the bad criminals. I had a scenario happen to me, and luckily there was a guy there that knew the guy and kind of got in the middle of it. I could have got shot over this. He's sitting on my table in front of my business. Kid throws a piece of paper. I said, hey, man, can you please pick that up? Because, I'm going to have to do it if you don't pick it up. He said, okay, no problem. He gets up again and throws it at my feet. Now, I can't take stuff like that. I can't. It was very hard for me to not react to that. But then I come to find out that this young guy's got a gun. We don't talk about all the illegal guns. All we ever talk about and putting penalties on the illegal guns. How'd they get the guns? Come on. If we have zero crime in our communities, then we can talk about how he got the gun. At this point, we need to have tough laws. When people use a gun in a felony, they need to pay the piper. We have no personal responsibility in our communities and in our young people anymore. It is time. When I screw up, I got to suck it up. And let me tell you, I've screwed up a lot of times. Again, I'm not perfect. I'm pretty much a classic blank up, okay? But we need personal responsibility. These children that react, videotaping them, slapping their teachers. Let me tell you, the Greek school that I went to in New York City, if you would have done that, it would be a double beating. The teacher
arms optional.
It would be a beating. Yeah, it would be a beating by the teacher, and then your parents would be there to beat you again. Yeah. Come on, we cannot keep on making excuses for bad behavior. We can't, and that's what's happening. That's what's happening, guys.
All right,
we need
George,
to stand up.
I'm gonna have to wind you up because
I gotta go to bed. I tell you what, I'm not gonna get any sleep. I'm an old Greek guy. I'm emotional. I get fired up. I can't help myself.
You know what? We're at that point. I think a lot of people are frustrated, and I don't know if this is true in your neighborhood, Martin, but there's a lot of people that are frustrated because they see this person getting away with that thing and this person doing that, and people are just their fuses are short. So Ed, I'm going to let you have the last word here, and then we'll We're gonna do the conspiracy theory tonight, against my better judgment.
I got three thoughts, and I'm gonna try to do this really quick. One, I'm gonna address to Martin. I fully support Martin's explanation to you on wanting you to be an ally, but you're not one of us. I'll tell you right now, John, to put that in another term, I'm a veteran. I totally support allies, but when people step up and they try to make, they try to step into that realm and pretend like they know what it was like, you'll never be a veteran. And especially if I see someone saying something about another veteran, I take that very personally because I know what that's like. So we tend to want to put it on racial tones, but I think that goes across a lot of things. And like I said, for me, it's the veteran status that you won't understand that unless you're one of us. The other part I wanted to bring up, and this was to Martin, and this is, we talk a lot about breaking down in crime. I made my career switch in the last year, and part of it was to get out of property management. And I'm going to go back to the fact that here in South Bend, where you have the highest crime rates, you also have the highest or the lowest home ownership rates. You have a lot of people, slumlords that come in and are renting. Some of these people have hundreds, if not thousands, of rentals. And we're not talking about going after them, raising quality of life. And to me, when you have these areas, that you're causing this to fester, right? Because who else is going to live in these areas other than people that have to? And so, and then the third thing, and I'll throw this back to Martin, is, for me, another part of it, back to the financing. I push hard here in South Bend, trying to get the city to invest in local communities. If you're doing local work in local communities, that you should have contractors that are here local. You should be investing local. We shouldn't be pulling in some big corporation. I mean, we're talking about this with marijuana, but some of our local businesses here can't afford to take those city contracts because those city contracts they're not getting paid out 30, 60 days. These guys don't have the financing to support that. And so the city ends up, shipping work off to different neighborhoods, and that money's leaving those neighborhoods when it should be staying there locally. And so to Martin, I'll throw it back to you, man. And I know you got your hands tied. There's a ton of stuff in the council, but those are just some of those ideas that I would, say that I think, I get the policing part of it, but I think unless you address some of those key issues to get businesses back into these cities and let money flow there, that you're still going to have these issues.
Yep. So Martin, we'll give you the last word, and then we'll go to the conspiracy theory, as I say, against my better judgment, but we're going to do that. So.
Well, sure. Of course, Ed, he brought up a lot of great points, and I appreciate that example. I actually never really thought about it like that, but once you use that example, I was like, that's a very good analogy. And to respond to some of George's comments, I'm not familiar with the safety patrol or whatever program existed in Indiana, but I am familiar with a program called Cahoots from Oregon, and Cahoots has been going on for 3 decades now. Very successful. And one of the things that I guess the benefits of Cahoots is it actually has reduced the amount of money that the local police department needs, because they now have, the people who are responding to these issues, they're now being helped from a mental health issue or just a health perspective, rather than, sending them into jail or into prison. They'd be out for 2 days, not clean, and then go back. But they also work with a clinic. There's also a clinic called Whitebird Clinic that helps to, facilitate these treatments and, to help people along. I also believe that you mentioned empowering police departments, especially local police departments. So in, Prince George's County, I say in the state of Maryland, we have one of the lowest decriminalization thresholds in terms of marijuana. So that is 10 grams They passed it in the House up to 4 ounces last year, but it didn't get a hearing or pass in the Senate. I don't really recall. But so what I'm saying is there was a decision last year. The Court of Appeals judge made a decision that the smell of marijuana is no longer probable cause for a police officer to search you. So I believe that that law should be codified, but it should also be expanded to vehicles, because we know that the smell of marijuana is used as a tool for law enforcement officers to search your vehicle, and to go hunting. So outside of that, raising the decrim level, we also should get rid of the paraphernalia, because of course paraphernalia is another way to catch you up. If I don't smell something, maybe I see a grinder or I see a plant. So all of these things are things we could think about. And as he said, beat cops. I do agree we need more beat cops. I do agree we need to play basketball with our police officers more often. But I believe it should be like regular and not just a transactional moment. I believe that this should be really ingrained in like how we're thinking about the way we're going to police. So yeah, and I also agree that it's somewhat personal responsibility, right? I also agree that that there's people who have just lost their minds, so I also agree that there is a bit of personal responsibility. We can't just put it on, but I also won't agree that the law enforcement officers are the least good or whatever.
That's a fact, Martin. You need to check that statistic. That's absolutely factual.
I believe that sounds like somewhat biased, but I believe that
no, that's a fact.
I believe law enforcement officers should have some type of insurance, to the point of where they continue to like have malpractice, they can no longer be insured as a law enforcement officer. And then we'll see how great law enforcement officers.
Well, you don't have to worry about malpractice insurance. There's a huge shortage of law enforcement officers because people aren't doing the job and people are dropping.
It's not that much of a shortage. Trust and believe. It's not as much of a shortage as you would believe. I understand that people are going to scare tactics and they're going to tell you the numbers.
It's not a scare tactic. I lived it for 2 years, and I tell you, it takes 20 minutes to respond. I got a bite mark from a violent guy who was not homeless and was not mentally ill that bit me on the arm. It took 20 minutes for the police to show up for that because they had run after run after run. I mean, it is not. They are. So we have a unique situation and an issue here. It's not the same everywhere, and I shouldn't claim it's that. We had a merger of our police departments here that created a huge void in our communities. We made a lot of changes that created a huge void. So I don't want to say that it's true everywhere. I don't know every single statistic. So I'm not disagreeing with you. And let me just say that so you know where I stand. I'm talking about our community here. We have a huge problem here. When we surpass Chicago, Illinois in percentage rate for murder in a city that's less than 1 million proper, we got problems.
Yeah,
we got problems.
The merger that they got half done and never got completed.
Yes, sir.
In a mess. So yeah, go ahead, Martin. Let's wind it up. And I've decided we're not going to. You're all off the hook on the conspiracy theory.
Good.
We're not going to do that.
Oh,
good.
Man.
I know.
Good luck to you. Hey, good luck to you, Martin. I wish you all the strength to be able to make a difference, my friend. I do, from the heart. Yes. I mean it.
And of course, I just want you to know that I do not in any way hate law enforcement, or anything like that. But I just wanted to hold, of course, people accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. Personal responsibility.
There's one last thing that I would like to say. We ran a billboard campaign with former Senator Jim Merritt. It said, "Reach for a gummy, not a syringe." Using cannabis as a harm reduction tool can help with some of these issues that we've been talking about. Because when you legalize, it allows the police force to have more resources to go after the hard criminals, like George was saying. And also, if you have medical professionals involved guiding people, they've had up to and over 80% of the patients say off of their heroin or opioids under several physicians' programs, like Dr. Solka in the New England states. And there's another one where they were around 60 to 80% success out on the West Coast. So that's something to think about. Is we have to involve the people where they need to be involved. Healthcare professionals, medical cannabis and addictions, law enforcement. We need to get them, like George and I was saying, involved in people. But that I saw that a lot of states lacked connecting the two. They'd have medical marijuana program, but they didn't involve the healthcare professionals like they should. Michigan has that problem. So that's something to think about is education and connecting the right professionals with the right people.
Yeah, it seems like the harvest is plenty and the laborers are few, and we have so many issues that intertwine that, man, we just seem like we've scratched the surface here with what we've talked tonight about. And I would love it more if our own councilman would come on our show. We have trouble getting our own guys. We got to go to Maryland to steal, just like he stole the Colts.
Oh, that is
stealing
hilarious.
the councilman from Maryland. Come on, somebody.
No, I mean, Martin, we're not going to get our guys to face up. We're not going to get our guys to face up here. We got issues here, and our guys are not handling it. They got a super majority on that council, and for 4 years they talked about the super majority in the state house, that they weren't getting nothing done. And now we got these guys. They also suddenly forgot about the super majority in the state house because they have their own super majority to get nothing done. Nothing done.
They are. It is. That is for a whole different show. If we can get one of those councilmen to come on. So, Martin.
Hey, Martin. I just wanted to throw out, Martin, it's a pleasure to have you. And if there's anything we could do as one of the regulars on this show, if there's anything we could do, ever pop into your show, if you need a guest, something, count me in, man. I'm all on board. So thanks for being on the show tonight.
Yeah, and we'll send the Colts back and they can fight it out with the Ravens. See what happens. Maybe we can come up with one good quarterback out of both teams. Maybe. I don't know.
Can I at least throw? I for once came with a conspiracy theory. Can I at least?
Okay. We're gonna do the conspiracy theory. I
do the one.
We're gonna do it. So get your hats out and let's get it
going.
And Martin, I'm gonna warn you. This is
Martin.
And
Martin, don't look. Don't look, Martin.
Here you go.
Don't look.
You're gonna laugh. Okay?
Hey, y'all, it's time for the conspiracy theory, so you better get your tinfoil hat out, and let's see what's going on this week.
All right, you just screwed around long enough that we got the tinfoil hat. What? Ed,
I just have a spoon, man. Haven't you seen me looking around for the last 20 minutes trying to find my hat? I do have a conspiracy theory for you, though.
Right, well, you go, because you may be the only one to have it.
I was amazed. I found an article and they did a survey and they found out that Spirit Airlines actually wasn't the worst airlines in the United States. They actually awarded that Frontier. And you know what's even more amazing? Once that news came out, Spirit and Frontier decided to merge.
It's Frontier.
That's my conspiracy theory. Spirit just couldn't be second. Would not take second worst.
A race to the bottom. A race to the bottom. So wow. So yeah, for those that don't know about Ed's misfortune on Spirit Airlines, it's been deep, and it's been. He mentioned him one night on our show, and he had a flight the next day, which was canceled. So it's a long-running joke. Let's see. I can come up with one. George, I know you don't have a conspiracy.
Well, I'm just going to say I feel like I'm reliving, the Revenge of the Nerds over here with those little metal hats on and all that aluminum hats on.
Got to keep the radiation off my beam.
Come on now, guys.
More radiation on my beam.
Martin's from the big city. He's going to be laughing at us when he turns this camera off.
He's laughing at us Hoosier rednecks out here anyway. So what's up?
We talk about some serious issues, but this is just our way of like having a little fun at the end of the show and laughing at ourselves. So we don't take ourselves.
It's just so much stuff going on. I mean, we have wars and just people have just a chip on their shoulder about so many things. We try to keep it fun and interesting. So, it's fun time. So if anybody wants to put anything back in there in the comments about the shows they're promoting or whatever, and Jason, feel free to put some stuff in there. We go back on the show. Sometimes they go back and answer questions and whatnot. Put some links in there because people will click on them. We got, I think we're going to have a lot more post viewership on this because I think a lot of folks are watching the State of the Union show. So that little thing.
Listen, hey John, came up with a great idea. Martin needs to invite us to Baltimore so we can go have some good seafood, some good rockfish, and all that good stuff, and then be his guest. I think that's a great idea. As far as I'm concerned, that's the best idea of the night.
Well, Martin will have to come out here to go to the Greek islands for some good Greek food.
We'll take him for some tenderloin and some salad with ranch dressing, the national or the state dressing of Indiana. Come on
it's
now.
Ranch. It's ranch. Really?
And the caramel.
Okay.
So,
That sounds like something in
Wyoming.
Wyoming.
I'm planning on heading out there this year for the Notre Dame Navy game, man. I will shoot you an invite if you want to tag team. I would love to go and meet up with you, and yeah, I'll be in town.
You'll feel right at home with a 3-to-1 Democrat ratio, Ed.
And then I'll also be able to tell Martin that they've actually won 2 Super Bowls.
Oh, the Ravens?
Look at that.
Martin,
make a note of that, Martin. Make a note of that.
Yeah,
Martin. That's something you should know.
Yes.
Well, Ed is our sports aficionado on this show. So, all right, everybody, let's give the peace out sign here. Let's send this one home to Mother. I do appreciate the guests. Appreciate you, Martin, and the fill-in guests. And who knows, we may have a full panel back next week. We do. We're going to talk about inflation next week. We have, my brain. We have somebody on to talk about inflation next week. Kurt Miller Harrison. And your mind's going to be blown on inflation and over the years, how much inflation has happened during certain periods of time. And you're going to think 7% is a walk in the park after Kurt gets done explaining it to you. I was amazed at his explanation of this. So we're going to have him on as a guest next week. We're going to talk about inflation. It's like, the really cool thing to talk about. So, hey, with that being said, everybody give the peace out, and we'll see you again next week, Tuesday 9. Thanks a lot, everybody, and adios, amigos.